Well, welcome. This is the Executive Speakers on Speakers podcast, and I believe this is a first. Stephen, one of the hardest working individuals in the speaking business, has taken the episode off. I get to be your guest host. My name is Riaz Megji, and in this conversation on the podcast, we get to talk to an incredible individual and a leader that is a highly sought after keynote speaker when it comes to innovation, when it comes to disruption, when it comes to leadership. He is a former Amazon executive, most known for launching and scaling the Amazon marketplace. And he's just launched the third edition of his popular book, The Amazon Way. His name is John Rossman. He's with us right now. John, welcome to the podcast. Congratulations on the third edition. And you know what I always love to do is ask people before we start rolling, what is on your mind? And at this point in the pandemic, as we move through, one of the first things you said to me is Amazon continues to be this fascinating organization when it comes to digital disruption. Why is it? How has it stood the test of time that's made it so fascinating for you, having left so many years ago?
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me, Riaz. Nice to meet you. And you're filling in some big shoes here from Stephen and everything. And he's been an incredible partner of mine throughout all of this. And so, yes, so the Amazon Way, Amazon's 14 Leadership Principles, third edition is releasing on Tuesday, June 8th. And I redid a lot of the book because the lessons from Amazon continue to evolve. And so Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and it really sets the basis for the company that they are and how they work together, what they prioritize, and how they keep an incredibly large organization today to continue to be entrepreneurial and relatively nimble and agile, and to drive accountability throughout the organization versus bringing it all to the center, and becoming bureaucratic, which is a dirty word at Amazon. Bureaucrat is a dirty word at Amazon. So I was at Amazon a long time ago. I was there from early 2002 through late 2005. I played a key role in launching the Amazon marketplace, which is third-party selling at Amazon.com. Today, that's over 58% of all units shipped and sold. And when I left Amazon in late 2005, started working with my clients on making change happen, right? On innovating and strategies. I started to put all the little mechanisms, the strategies from Amazon in place. And I had a client at the Gates Foundation pull me aside and said, John, you got to capture these. They're priceless. And so he's helped me on these books since that point. And Amazon, as you mentioned, I think continues to be the most interesting company in the digital era. And there can be multiple opinions on that, right? I leave that open, but in my humble opinion, it is. And it's not just because it's self-serving. I believe it's the most interesting because first, it's one of the only companies that truly has multiple lines of business, right? So when you think about the other big tech businesses, they're primarily kind of one business model. Amazon has, I could name off 5 or 6 different business models and still be missing a couple from that list. And so I think that's fascinating. I think the way that they put those different elements together is fascinating. But I think what is most fascinating about them is their leadership principles, like how they work as a leadership team, how they work throughout the organization is something we can all learn from. And so I always say, this isn't about Amazon. This is about you. And how do you evolve your leadership perspective, your management science, how you work together, your culture, in order to be more relevant, to innovate, to compete, and to win in the digital era? I think you have to evolve some of the things that you think were right in the prior era, but may not translate for the future. And that's really the story. That's the advisory work I do with companies. That's what I come out and talk about is what do you add to your perspectives so that you compete better in the digital era?
When you talk about these leadership principles, and it's clear that you double down on the principles of how they apply to any company out there, as opposed to just how great Amazon is as a company. What surprises you? There's a quote you put in the book from Leonardo da Vinci about simplicity being the ultimate sophistication. And it kind of made me smile because I think about the idea that common sense in many ways still isn't common practice. So what surprises you, John, of what companies miss on, especially with the leadership principles and these principles that they might be missing right now as we move out of the pandemic?
Well, it obviously depends upon the company and the leadership team, but a few kind of patterns that I notice. First is that everybody wants the prize to go to the podium of being an innovator, of having growth, of having the outcomes that this results in, but nobody really, rarely do they really have a perspective on it. Like, well, what are the inputs? What do we need to do to train so that we get those results that we want? And they don't understand the pain, the sacrifice, the long-term view that you have to take to get there. They want immediate results. And growth and innovation and change and markets don't work like that. They take a long time. What people don't remember is really so Amazon's call it a 27-year-old company. What they tend to forget is, let's call it the first 15 years of that company. All they remember is like the last 10 years where it's just been growth, stock price shooting through the roof, all these incredible stories, some of the narrative that's going on around Amazon. They don't remember the first 15 years. They don't remember when we were being doubted, when we were being ridiculed, when we were being called Amazon.bomb, Amazon.con, Amazon.org, when there was a threat that we would go out of business, when everybody said, like, it'll never work. It really isn't what is going to work in this industry. You don't understand our industry. You'll never be a threat to us and everything, right? Amazon went about their business exactly the same way then as they do now. And so these leadership principles were forged during tough days. And what I respect so much about Amazon and Jeff Bezos is he believed in these before he was successful. He bet on himself, and he bet on these principles before he knew that they were going to be successful like this. So it was going to lead to these things. And so the thing that surprises me the most is that people don't question their own perspectives on these things more, and they all want the rewards, but they don't look back at the history of the company and what it took to get there. And they think it came easy, and it didn't. And Amazon deserves everything that they get in the market today. They earned it. It wasn't handed to them. And so I would just say it's within our capability to reinvent within your safe self, within your space and everything. But don't think that the playbook that got you here is going to be the playbook that gets you there.
Well, I mean, you're living proof of this reinvention. And if we look back to the early 2000s of what you did with Amazon Marketplace, that was something new. And you had to get buy-in from not only the culture within the company, but also the outsiders to say this is something that could work. And I think this is a great tangible example of, regardless of if it's the early 2000s of where we're at now, how do you do it to get people to buy into a new idea and say, this could be the next big thing, and get them to believe it?
Yeah, so the merchants app business, which is what we call the marketplace when we were launching it in 2002, again, history matters, and everything, right? That was the third version of a third-party selling business at Amazon. So they had started with an auctions business, failed. They started with something that was called Z Shops, failed. And so it was the third try at Amazon and everything. And guess who the biggest doubters were for this third version? It was internal leaders at Amazon. But Bezos was committed to it. He got the board to be committed to it. And he said, we are going to do this again. And so we evolved and tried it again. And even that success didn't come quickly. We launched the merchants app business in late 2002. It really took 5 or 6 years for those categories to develop, for customers to understand, oh, I can come to Amazon, not just for books, music, video, but for apparel and for sporting goods and for electronics and for home and all of these categories that we leverage the merchants app platform largely for. and it took our own organization to believe in it. And then we combined it with Prime and with this capability called FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon. And it was really that trifecta with patience underneath it that then allowed the marketplace to take on. And it goes back to like, everybody wants these new ideas to just have traction from the beginning. And businesses, new businesses with a new customer experience, with a new business model, they don't typically grow that way. And that's, I think, again, back to like my whole essence is about, this isn't about Amazon. This is about what we can learn from Amazon. Is like, I think Amazon's real superpower is patience. And it doesn't get talked about enough, that patience that it takes. You have to focus on the inputs, the things we're in control of, pay attention to the outputs, but really like, well, what do we learn from that? Like, what's the market telling us from those outputs? And you have to have a real good dose of independent, critical thinking to know, like, do I need patience? Do I need to adjust? Do I need to turn off? Like, that needs to be an independent assessment. And you always need to be challenging, your perspectives, because you have both things happen. Both people get impatient, but then they also get biased, like, oh, I just love this idea, we're going to stick with it, when actually the right thing to do is to change it or to turn it off. And so that's why you need independence in those types of perspectives. But those are the things that we can learn from Amazon, and why history just matters.
When you talk about the value of patience, especially in leadership, when you're entering uncertain territory, I can't help but think about the range of emotions. And let's take, for example, what you did with Marketplace. What went through your mind knowing that this would take time to work? You were getting challenged internally. Did you self-doubt yourself? Did you doubt yourself? What did you go through emotionally to get to the place where imposter syndrome, was it a thing, and how you remain confident to stay the course?
I don't remember. I remember the internal doubt, but I remember the support that we had from key leaders like Jeff Bezos, from Jason Kyler, which was just essential, and how they took care of that stuff and just let us kind of operate. But it was a busy time. We had so much work to do with so many partners to get them launched and to do it in a way that was trusted for our customers, represented our brand, Amazon's brand well, and everything. I don't remember time for any other self-doubt at everything. And I think that's one of the fun things about making change happen, about innovating, is it's great work, and you become absorbed in the mission. You become absorbed in the work. You get absorbed in making it successful. And that's why I think there's several benefits for really creating an innovation agenda within an organization. One of those benefits is, I think it brings an optimism to the culture and to the team that, we are investing in the future and we can make this happen. And so I think that's just one of the side benefits that comes out of an innovation agenda.
John, as you speak about the process learned at Amazon and how you support companies now, I can hear these principles coming out. I mean, this book has been out for years, and these principles are universal. These ideas of thinking big, inventing and simplifying, earning trust. But the real neat thing about the third edition is you're introducing a 15th principle, a new principle. Tell us about this and why it's so relevant right now.
Let me just twist that a little bit and everything. So first, while the book has been out, it hasn't been out for the past couple of years. And so we're reintroducing the Amazon way. It is a third edition, redid a lot of the book. It has a new forward in it from a gentleman by the name of Tom Alberg. Tom was the founder of Madrona Venture Capital in Seattle, an early investor in Amazon, and was on the board of Amazon for 23 years. And so to get Tom to write the forward was a big credibility boost to what I'm writing about and to the impact of the principles. I wrote a new preface in the book, and I'm suggesting to Amazon, from a place of strategy, not from a place of criticism, but from a place of strategy, a recommendation for them to think about, right? And what I'm suggesting they think about is, how do we change a narrative that is going on out there about Amazon, really, which is about big tech, which is this negative narrative that's going on, whether it's about taxes or fulfillment centers or employee safety or the marketplace and unfair competition, like whatever it is. I think that Amazon needs to think about it from a strategic point of view. And I think that the leadership principle that I suggest to them, if they would consider it, and I'm humble about this, like I don't actually think Amazon will consider this and everything, but if they would, I think it would be effective. They've kind of proven that this thinking works, because 2.5 years ago, when Amazon was being loudly criticized about the pay at their fulfillment centers, which was industry competitive at that point, they did a jujitsu move and they just said, great, we're going to pay everybody starting next week. They didn't wait long to do this. We're going to pay everybody $15 an hour in fulfillment centers. And that reset the bar from an industry standard. And guess what it did? It really quieted down the narrative relative to that. And so what I've been thinking about is like, how do you take that type of strategy and apply it more universally, right? And so the 15th leadership principle, it essentially is, how does Amazon, in the position that they're in now, and if I think forward, not to the past 25 years, but to the forward 25 years, they're a leader in everything. And we need them to lead more than just a great company. They need to lead our communities. They need to lead our environment. They need to lead in employee safety. They need to lead in helping other competition stay vibrant in our country. And so that's the leadership principle, is really comes from the spirit of stewardship. And how do they help set the table and create an environment for everybody else to win in too? And so I kind of riff off of the notion of the golden rule, which, in its essence is do unto others as you would undo yourself. I expand on it and I try to write it in a way that is durable. It will last time. It will last circumstances. And so I don't point to specific circumstances, but really it challenges Amazon, both at the leadership level and at every employee, to essentially, be a steward, do the right thing always. You still have to hit all the other leadership principles. I think it will help them to innovate better. And so I think internally it would have some impact, but I think it would also reset the narrative externally and raise the bar for every other, especially big leading organization, in understanding and thinking through essentially what I'm all asking them to do, which is rethink your position relative to how you compete and what leadership means in the digital era.
And as you talk about the idea of rethinking leadership, it's a fascinating point, because in 2021, there's a transition in leadership at the top for Amazon. Jeff Bezos stepping aside and Andy Jassy stepping in. And Andy Jassy's leadership, he's been highly successful with Amazon Web Services. What are your thoughts on the idea of, when you have such a successful company, how do you make that transition of leadership truly feel seamless, so a company that's been a successful disruptor in the digital era continues its momentum?
Well, I think that transition is largely a non-event, honestly, at Amazon, partially because Bezos is still the executive chairman. So he's going to continue to add the magic where he adds the most impact at Amazon, which is in its big bets, in its innovation, in its culture. But he basically puts Andy in the hot seat relative to dealing with all the public facing issues, and everything. But that's why these leadership principles are so impactful, because they're not Jeff's leadership principles, they're Amazon's leadership principles. And they're not a poster, they're the culture of how they work together and how they make decisions and what they prioritize. And Andy's not just an AWS leader, he's an Amazon leader, right? He came up through the music business and at Amazon and everything. And he's tremendously well prepared for the role, because he understands not just the business, but how culture and leadership works at Amazon. So I think it's not a big story from a like, well, how will it impact Amazon and whatnot? But what I think, again, like the story for other companies is that when you don't work to develop leadership, when you don't work to codify how we prioritize, how we set strategy, how we do all these things, guess what? You become too dependent upon one individual. And when that individual has a change, a company can be significantly impacted by it. And so again, yet another good argument for why taking the time to develop your own perspective on these matters is really an important aspect of stewardship, which again is about creating opportunities for others in the future.
And as we look towards the future, John, it's a real interesting time now with remote work setup becoming a reality for many companies, people getting excited about coming back together. And I know you talk a lot about earning trust and having that sense of connection with one of the principles. What gets you excited at this point in 2021 about the opportunity leaders have to build culture and drive their companies?
Well, the pandemic was, a tragedy in so many ways, and I don't want to underplay the loss or the hardship that came through this past, year and a half and everything. But there's some silver linings in it, and I think above all else, what we've proven is like, guess what? We can change, right? We can adapt. Some companies have proven that, right? We can adapt, and I hope. What I'm optimistic about, what I am optimistic about is that leadership comes out of this with a sense of confidence and a can-do attitude, and even more, not just awareness, but like they understand we have to change. We have to change how we compete, how we create a customer experience, how we invest in the future, how we innovate. And that's what I'm optimistic about coming out of this is more than ever. What we've seen is winners, and from a business standpoint, we've seen winners and losers through this pandemic. And the winners were the ones who were like able to be nimble and who were already trialing some things that were the future models. And they were able to deploy those and see success using those. And so I hope that everybody now is like even more committed to an innovation agenda.
And perhaps one of the silver linings, you say the key word being nimble, and that nimbleness, I know you touch on that in the book. Maybe that is a new skill set that some leaders learned if they didn't have it already. As we kind of wrap this conversation, John, you've given us some great insights on where we can really go with our leadership now and in the years to come. If you could look back at this past year on a real personal level, connection is a big part of leadership. And of all of the moments you've had to elevate companies, elevate leaders, is there an unexpected connection, conversation, or moment on a personal level that happened for you that's had a real positive impact on your life? What stands out for you?
Yeah. So one of the, again, real silver linings, the things that came out of this was because I wasn't flying everywhere all the time to do in-person keynotes, and I was doing mostly webinars, it gave me more time to work on this book. And as part of working on this book, I connected and reconnected with a number of my former Amazon colleagues, and they helped me improve the book. So I updated a number of the leadership principles and really focused on like, well, how do you do this, right? Like, what are the mechanisms you do to do this? I completely rewrote one chapter based off a conversation with a good friend of mine, a guy I hired at Amazon. He's still at Amazon. It was really about deliver results, which is the last leadership principle. And it's really like how they set goals and how they debate goals and the inputs, the things we are more in control of versus just focusing on the outputs, the things we want from this, and how they debate those more thoroughly, completely reshaped. And so one of the personal connection points was just having the opportunity and kind of the agenda being the book to reconnect with a number of Amazon leaders, former Amazon leaders, and get their perspective on how these leadership principles have impacted them. And I think if you really tune into the Amazon alumni channels, the respect and the admiration and the change that they all recognize that they took from Amazon and that environment is the biggest underlying thread or essence that you'll get out of that alumni group.
Well, that shines through in the book. And I think those connections are definitely relatable of how people have reconnected with people that have, they've worked with now, or maybe they've worked with over the years. Listen, congrats on the 3rd edition of the Amazon Way. I think it's a book of service in many ways for leaders and companies all around the world. This was awesome to do this and learn from you today, man. I appreciate it. And I only gave you one stumper, man. It was right at the end, just to reflect on a personal level. So I appreciate you getting candid and real with it.
Perfect. Being introspective and reflecting on oneself isn't always what you're prepared for. So I appreciate your preparation and the dialogue and getting to meet you. And thanks for the opportunity.
Game on, John. Keep changing people for good. Love it. The Amazon Way. Where can people pick up the book, by the way?
At Amazon, it's available in paperback, it's available in Kindle, and it'll be available in Audible edition in early August.
Fantastic. Put in a good word for with Stephen for me. This was fun to guest host and do this. Thanks so much, John.
You got it. Thanks.